that is anti-feminism, a religion where women are suppressed and their voices are completely overlooked. Well, clearly that's not the case. And the myth that women's struggle are alien to Islam has unfortunately become the order of the day. It is this myth that today we stand to break. It is this notion that our colloquium, Pathbreakers, 20th century Muslim women, is going to address. So without any further delay, we already have Dr. Mohini Giri, who will be chairing the session. Dr. Giri is the chairperson. She was the... Right, of course, she doesn't need an introduction. Sorry. I will be inviting upon my next... I would certainly be... I'll be happy to do that, ma'am. Dr. Mohini Giri was the Indian community service worker, and she is an activist who's been chairperson of the Guild of Services, an organization providing advocacy of women and children's rights. She was also the chairperson of the National Commission for Women. Thank you very much, Dr. Giri, for being here. Our next panelist would be Professor Akhtarul Wase. Professor Wase. He's the president of the Maulana Azad University, Jodhpur, India, and he's also the editor of 4 journals. Professor Wase. Thank you. Our next member would be Dr. Ismat Mehdi. Dr. Ismat has studied French in the University of Geneva and University of Poitiers, German in Goethe Institute, Munich, and Arabic in the College of Arts and Science. And she's the managing trustee of Sarvodaya International Trust AP chapter. Dr. Ismat, thank you. Mr. Anil. I'd like to now take this opportunity to invite upon Dr. Farida Khan. Now, Dr. Farida is an academic professor and former Dean of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia. She's also the former member of the National Commission for Minorities and Rights on Kashmir, as well as educational issues of backward communities and minorities. Thank you, Dr. Farida. I will now hand over the mic to Dr. Mohini. Ma'am.
My boss. तो 1996 में ऐसा हुआ कि लगा हम लोगों को पूरे देश को जा रहे थे. We were going around the whole country, Saida and myself and Padma sitting here. And what did we find? That really speaking, was there any voice given to all those several thousands and thousands of women, whether they be from the Dalit community, whether they be from the other communities, Jain community, whether they be from the Muslim community, where was the voice? And lo and behold, my friend Saida came out with a set of tremendously good recommendations, which was handed over to the National, is that right, Saida? Handed over to the National Commission for Women. I wish today, after 40 years or 30 years, if we had just looked into them, this would not be the situation. I would like to start here where Seema left. Seema said that now high time that we find what can we do among women itself. Today your topic is feminism, so can we find that kind of a strength, that kind of a mobilization that my friends with whom I had worked in my childhood, all of them from Lucknow, Believe me, I was 10 years old and they were my mentors. Then I was 18 years old and they were my friends. I was started working with them. Can we mobilize that kind of women whose portraits you see downstairs? Please, I beg you, can I now start with a small prayer during the month of Ramzan to say, Almighty, please replace our fear into freedom. Please replace our distrust into trust. Amen. Please replace our hatred towards love. If only we can do that, if women can rise to that occasion, then only we can be able to do something. Believe me, when I worked with all those women in Lucknow, I'm born and brought up in Lucknow. My father was the Vice Chancellor of the Lucknow University, and all these people passed out from the Lucknow University, most of those, Begum Azad Rasool, Begum Habibullah, and so many names, I can't tell you. All of them worked as to settle India, to see that India is a great country at that time. Can we rise to that occasion and see that we do all that I had said in my prayer? With those words, I call upon all my very learned speakers, whom I respect a lot, whom I've known for a long time, also many of them. Please come, please clarify and say, what are the solutions for today's problems? Can we make groups of women here itself? Can we make groups of men and women here itself who can bring out a solution? I don't want to see in India with this kind of a thing where there's hatred going on both sides. I won't say Muslims, I won't say Hindus, I won't say Parsis. Every side there's hatred. How can we replace that? Please get up, rise to the occasion, and think about it. With these words, thank you for... Sorry, as a chair, I had no business to talk. But I feel so strongly about it that I said, let me just take 5 minutes of your time. Thank you for hearing me out. May I request my brother, Wasi Sahab, to please give his views.
बहुत शुक्रिया मोहतरमा मोहनी गिरी साहिबा, मोहतरमा फरीदा ख़ान साहिबा, मोहतरमा इस्मत मेहदी साहिबा, मैं सबसे पहले सैयदा आपा का शुक्रगुज़ार हूँ कि उन्होंने मुझे हुक्म दिया और उनका हुक्म बजा लाना मेरे लिए हमेशा खुशी की बात भी होती है और उसके अलावा मेरे पास कोई रास्ता भी नहीं होता। आज का जो मौजू है वो बहुत अहम है और मैं मज़हब का तालिबे इल्म हूँ, ज़िंदगी भर उसी की रोटी भी खाई है मैंने। मुझे आप ये कहने की इजाज़त दीजिए कि मैं फेमिनिज़म को विमेन एम्पावरमेंट की तौर पे इस्तेमाल करूँ। जानिए, जहाँ तक इस्लाम का सवाल है, ये बात मैं कहीं और से नहीं कहना चाहता। सीधी सादी बात यह है कि कुरान में जहाँ जहाँ मर्दों की खूबियाँ बताई गई हैं, उनकी विशेषता और उनके गुण बताए गए हैं, वहीं साइमल्टेनियसली बराबर के साथ एक ही आवाज़ में औरतों को भी बराबर के वही गुण और वही विशेषताएं और वही खूबियाँ बताई गई हैं। इसलिए कुरान जो है वो औरत और मर्द में कोई फ़र्क नहीं करता है। एक बात तो ये समझने की है। दूसरे, चूँकि वीमेन एम्पावरमेंट कितने तरह के हो सकते हैं, वो इकोनॉमिक एम्पावरमेंट हो सकता है, वो एजुकेशनल एम्पावरमेंट हो सकता है, वो पॉलिटिकल एम्पावरमेंट हो सकता है, वो स्पिरिचुअल एम्पावरमेंट हो सकता है। मेरा ख़्याल ये है इनके अलावा और कोई एम्पावरमेंट की दूसरी ज़रूरत शायद नहीं है और है भी नहीं। अब मैं कहीं और नहीं जाता, ख़ुद जो प्रॉफिट हैं जिनके बारे में कि मेरा ख़्याल ये है कि मुसलमानों में किसी तरह का भेदभाव और मतभेद नहीं है, उनके हवाले से अगर बात करूं तो मैं समझता हूं कि जितने भी विमेन एम्पावरमेंट के आयाम हो सकते हैं, किस्में हो सकती हैं, वो सब प्रॉफिट की ज़िंदगी में हमें उनके घराने में मिल जाते हैं। इकोनॉमिक एम्पावरमेंट का सबसे बड़ा सिंबल उम्मुल मोमिनीन, उम्मत की माँ हज़रत खदीजा रज़ी अल्लाह ताला अन्हा है, जो कि बड़ी एक्सपोर्टर और इम्पोर्टर थी। एक तरफ सीरिया और दूसरी तरफ यमन में उनका सामान आता और जाता था, और वो मोहम्मद इब्ने अब्दुल्ला जैसे नौजवानों को इंगेज करती थीं अपने ट्रेड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव और सेल्स एग्जीक्यूटिव के तौर पे। जी, दिलचस्प बात यह है कि उन्होंने बाद में मोहम्मद इब्ने अब्दुल्ला यानी मोहम्मद रसूलुल्लाह से शादी कर ली, और शादी करने के बाद जब मोहम्मद साहब प्रॉफिट हो गए और प्रॉफिटहुड उन्हें मिल गई, तो मुझे आप कुरान की ना कोई एक आयत दिखा सकते हैं और ना प्रॉफिट साहब की कोई सेइंग दिखा सकते हैं जिसमें उन्होंने खदीजा से कहा हो कि अब तक तो सब ठीक था, लेकिन अब तुम चूँकि प्रॉफिट की बीवी हो इसलिए सारी चीज़ों को छोड़ छाड़ के घर की चार दीवारी में बंद हो के बैठ जाओ। उन्होंने नहीं कहा। जो चीज़ अल्लाह और उसके रसूल ने उम्मत की माँ के लिए जायज़ रखी, वो उम्मत की बेटियों के लिए गलत नहीं हो सकती है। ये बात हमें समझनी चाहिए। नंबर 1। नंबर 2, एजुकेशनल एम्पावरमेंट का मामला ये है कि 1/3 ऑफ शरिया वी मुस्लिम्स ओ टू हज़रत उम्मुल मोमिनीन आयशा रज़ी अल्लाह ताला अन्हा। रसूलुल्लाह की दूसरी बीवी हैं हज़रत आयशा, उनको हम 1/3 शरिया जो है वो उनसे हमें मिली है। और माफ़ कीजिएगा, उन इश्यूज़ पर उन्होंने उम्मत को गाइडेंस दी है और एजुकेशन दी है कि जिनके ऊपर आज भी हमारे घरों में माएँ बेटियों से और बहनें बहनों से बात करने में थोड़ा झिझकती हैं। मालूम हुआ ऑन सच डेलिकेट इश्यूज शी हैज़ एजुकेटेड द उम्मा। तो सवाल ये है, और ये किसी और के कहने से नहीं किया उन्होंने, प्रॉफिट ने उनसे कहा था कि जब मैं नहीं रहूँगा तो लोग तुम्हारे पास आएंगे और हमारे और तुम्हारे रिश्ते के बारे में, हमारी तुम्हारी घरेलू ज़िंदगी के बारे में सवाल करेंगे। तुम बगैर संकोच के, बगैर झिझक के लोगों को बताना। तो उन्होंने बताया, तो मालूम हुआ वो उम्मत की पहली एजुकेटर हैं। और माफ़ कीजिएगा, जिस उम्मत को एक औरत से 1/3 शरिया मिली हो, उस उम्मत के अंदर किस तरह से ये चीज़ हो सकती है। एक बात यहाँ मैं और कह दूँ इसी में, आप माफ़ कीजिएगा गुरेज के लिए, कि अल्लाह के रसूल सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम जो हैं उनका एक बड़ा कारनामा ये है कि वो जो मज़हब लेके आए इस्लाम, उसमें नमाज का हुक्म, ज़कात का हुक्म, रोज़े का हुक्म, हज का हुक्म बाद में आया, पहले पढ़ने का हुक्म आया। ये बहुत दिलचस्प बात है। और अल्लाह के रसूल ने जब यूनेस्को नहीं थी, जब यूनिवर्सलाइजेशन ऑफ एजुकेशन के मूवमेंट नहीं थे, जब सर्व शिक्षा अभियान नहीं थे, उस वक्त उन्होंने कहा था इल्म हासिल करना फ़र्ज है हर मुसलमान मर्द पर, हर मुसलमान औरत पर। और बात यहीं नहीं छोड़ी, बल्कि एक जगह आगे बढ़ के दूसरी बात कही और कहा इल्म हासिल करो माँ की गोद से लेकर और कब्र तक। ये बहुत दिलचस्प बात है कि अल्लाह के रसूल ने माँ की गोद कहा, बाप की गोद नहीं कहा। इस्लामिक स्टडीज़ के एक तालिबे इल्म के तौर पे मैं ये समझता हूँ कि इसका मतलब ये है कि अल्लाह के रसूल ने हर उस बाप पर जो बेटियों वाला है, इस बात को अनिवार्य कर दिया, इनेविटेबल बना दिया कि वो अपनी बच्चियों को आला तालीम दिलाए। चूँकि जो आज की बेटियां हैं वही तो कल की माएँ होंगी। अगर आज तालीम याफ्ता नहीं होंगी तो कल उनकी गोद जो है वो आने वाली जो जनरेशन्स हैं उनके लिए किस तरह से एक नर्सरी बन पाएगी। ये एक बात मुझे और कहनी थी। तीसरी जो बात है वो पॉलिटिकल एम्पावरमेंट की है। पॉलिटिकल एम्पावरमेंट में मैं फिर रसूल के घराने में जाता हूँ। एक क्या मैं प्रॉफिट की लाइफ में एक घटना है जिसे हम सुलह हुदैबिया कहते हैं। जंगें जितनी हुई हैं मक्के वालों से प्रॉफिट की, वो मदीने के पास हुई हैं, लेकिन जो सुलह की संधि हुई है, ट्रीटी हुई है, वो मक्के के पास हुई है। उसे हम सुलह हुदैबिया कहते हैं। प्रॉफिट ने बहुत क्या मैं उनके जो कंपेनियन से उनकी मर्जी के ख़िलाफ़ और उनकी राय में नीचे गिर के मक्के वालों से सुलह कर ली, और उसके ऊपर बड़ा लोगों में रोष था और लोग एग्री नहीं कर रहे थे प्रॉफिट से, और ये पहला मौका था कि उनके कंपेनियन उनकी बात नहीं मान रहे थे। ऐसे वक्त में प्रॉफिट परेशान थे, ऊपर से भी उन्हें कोई दिशा निर्देश नहीं मिल रहा था, क्या अल्लाह की तरफ से कोई वही नहीं आ रही थी, रिवलेशन नहीं आ रहा था। ऐसे वक्त में उनकी बीवी उम्मे सलमा जो हैं उन्होंने उन्हें बुलाया और कहा कि आप जाइए और जो एहराम की हालत में आप हैं, यानी दो सिले हुए बग़ैर सिले कपड़े पहने हुए हैं, इन्हें जाके उतारिए और ये आपकी देखा देखी खुद भी ये करेंगे बग़ैर कुछ कहे हुए। और ऐसा ही हुआ। मालूम ये हुआ कि प्रॉफिट की ज़िंदगी में एक ऐसी समस्या जिसका समाधान नज़र नहीं आ रहा था, एक ऐसा मसला जिसका हल नज़र नहीं आ रहा था, वो माफ़ कीजिएगा अगर किसी की राय से, किसी के मशवरे से, किसी की विजडम से अगर हल हो पाया और उसका पॉलिटिकल सॉल्यूशन निकल पाया तो वो एक औरत ही थी, और वो अगेन प्रॉफिट की बीवी थी। और प्रॉफिट ने, माफ़ कीजिएगा, ये नहीं कहा कि तुम औरत है, तुम्हारी अक्ल तो नाक़िस होती है, मैं तुम्हारी राय कैसे मान सकता हूँ। तो जब औरत की राय अगर प्रॉफिट मान सकते हैं तो आज का मर्द जो है और उनका शौहर जो है वो क्यों नहीं मान सकता। ये बात समझ में आने वाली नहीं है। ये मेल शोविनिज्म तो हो सकता है, इस्लाम नहीं हो सकता। ये बात बहुत साफ करना चाहता हूँ। एक और मिसाल मैं देता हूँ पॉलिटिकल विजडम के, हमें उसकी एम्पावरमेंट की। करबला का वाक़या बहुत मशहूर वाक़या है, हम सब जानते हैं। प्रॉफिट की नवासी, अली और फातिमा की बेटी, हसन और हुसैन की बहन ज़ैनब, जब करबला में हुसैन शहीद हो गए, उनके साथी शहीद हो गए, तो ऐसे वक्त में जब ख़ानदान रिसालत जो था, प्रॉफिट का परिवार जो था, उसको एक तरह से वो बिखर चुका था, उसको जमा करने वाली और अपने नेतृत्व में, अपनी लीडरशिप में दमिश्क ले जाने वाली कोई और नहीं थी बल्कि सैयदा ज़ैनब थी। और बकौल शायर शाम की तारीकियों में नूर फैला कर रही, अज़मत मज़लूम को जालिम से मनवा कर रही। उन्होंने जो खुतबा दिया दरबार शाम के अंदर करबला के शहीदों के लिए, वो गैर मामूली है और हमारे इतिहास का हिस्सा है। और पॉलिटिकल एम्पावरमेंट जो है उसमें औरतों की जो भागीदारी है उसका सबसे जीता जागता सबूत है। ये बात हमें समझनी चाहिए। आखिरी स्पिरिचुअल एम्पावरमेंट की बात है, माफ़ कीजिएगा, जो विमेन कंपेनियन थी प्रॉफिट की, शी वाज द सिंबल ऑफ द स्पिरिचुअल एम्पावरमेंट। लेकिन मैं एक और नाम आपके सामने पेश करता हूँ और वो नाम है राबिया बसरी का। राबिया बसरी जो हैं, उनका शी वाज द ग्रेट सूफी सेंट। उनका मामला ये है कि एक दिन लोगों ने देखा कि बसरे की सड़क है, गर्मी का ज़माना है, तपिश का आलम है, लू चल रही है, लेकिन राबिया अपने एक हाथ में पानी से भरी बाल्टी और दूसरे हाथ में अंगारों से दहकती हुई अंगीठी लेके चली जा रही हैं। लोगों ने राबिया को रोका और पूछा कि इस वक्त इस हालत में कहाँ जा रही हो। कहा जन्नत और दोज़ख की तलाश में जा रही हूँ। कहा खैरियत। कहा जन्नत मिल जाए तो इस अंगीठी की आग से उसे भस्म कर दूं, और जहन्नुम मिल जाए, नरक मिल जाए तो इस बाल्टी के पानी से उसकी आग को ठंडा कर दूं, ताकि लोग जन्नत के लालच और जहन्नुम के खौफ से खुदा की इबादत करना बंद करें, इबादत को इबादत की तरह करें, तिजारत ना बनाएं। तो ये किसने सबक हमें दिया? ये संदेश और ये सबक भी एक औरत ने दिया। और स्पिरिचुअल एम्पावरमेंट जो है उसमें उनका जो दर्जा है वो ये है कि उनके ज़माने के जो बड़े बड़े सूफिया थे और बाद के सूफिया थे, वो भी उनका नाम बड़े आदर और सम्मान के साथ लेते हैं। तो पता ये चला कि इस्लाम के अंदर जहाँ तक विमेन एम्पावरमेंट की बात है वो पूरी तरह मौजूद है और ख़ुद रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम जो हैं उनके ज़रिए वो व्यवहार, मैंने कुरान का तो आपसे जो बात कही वो आप कह सकते हैं थ्योरेटिकल है, लेकिन प्रॉफिट ने प्रैक्टिकल लेवल पे व्यवहारिक स्तर पे औरतों को वो तमाम अधिकार सुनिश्चित किए और उनको होने दिया और दुनिया के सामने पेश किया। अब आजकल जो कुछ हो रहा है, जो कुछ शिकायतें मुस्लिम समाज से हैं या किसी भी समाज से हैं, माफ़ कीजिएगा, उसकी वजह जो है वो माफ़ कीजिएगा धर्म नहीं है, मज़हब नहीं है, बल्कि ख़ुद मर्दों का एक प्रभुत्व है और मर्दों का एक मोनोपलाइजेशन है। उसके ऊपर हमें सोचना चाहिए। हमारी प्रॉब्लम ये है कि हमने, माफ़ कीजिएगा, मुसलमानों के समाज के बारे में आजकल जो एक नई धारणा उभर के आई है वो लगता है कि मुसलमानों में न माँ होती है, न बेटी होती है, न बहन होती है, सिर्फ बीवी होती है और वो भी 3 तलाक देने के लिए होती है। ये एक परेशानी की बात है, इसको हमें समझना चाहिए और ये समझना चाहिए और मुसलमानों का भी फ़र्ज़ है कि मुसलमान इस चीज़ को देखें कि दुनिया में उनकी ये तस्वीर क्यों बन रही है। मैं मुस्लिम वीमेन फोरम जिस तरह का काम करता रहा है उसके लिए हमेशा से उसका क्या मैं मद्दा रहा हूँ, उसका प्रशंसक रहा हूँ, उसका समर्थक रहा हूँ और मुझे खुशी है कि यूएन वीमेन ने भी अब उनको एक तरह से अपने साथ जोड़ा है या उनके साथ जुड़े हैं। ये बहुत अच्छी बात है। आइए दुआ करें रमज़ान के महीने में। पहली बात तो उन तमाम दुआओं पे आमीन एक दफ़े कहें जो मोहनी गिरी साहिबा ने मांगी थी, और एक दफ़े फिर हम दुआ करें कि मर्द जो हैं वो उस रास्ते से जो मज़हब का नहीं है उस रास्ते से अपने को बचाएं, और अगर मज़हब के मानने वाले हैं तो भी उस रास्ते को अपनाएं जो कि मज़हब ने बताया है। अपनी सोच को मज़हब करार न दें, और वो भी जिन्हें कोई रस्म दुआ याद नहीं है वो भी दुआ के लिए हाथ उठाएं और दुआ करें कि हमारे समाज में मर्द और औरत के बीच में जो खाई है वो दूर हो और हम औरतों को वो हक़ दें जो कि उनका हक़ है। और हमें ये नहीं भूलना चाहिए, बक़ौल इक़बाल, वजूद ज़न से है तस्वीर कायनात में रंग, इसी के साथ से है ज़िंदगी का सोज़े दुरूं, मकालमात फ़लातूं न लिख सकी लेकिन इसी के शौले से टूटा शरार अफ़लातूं। सुक़रात, अफ़लातून और मोहम्मद कोई भी दुनिया में नहीं होते अगर माएँ ना होती। आइए माँओं का सम्मान करें और रमज़ान के महीने में माँओं की अज़मत और भलाई के लिए दुआ करें। बहुत शुक्रिया।
आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। आपने इतने अच्छे लफ्ज़ों में हमको समझाया कि असली एम्पावरमेंट इकोनॉमिक, पॉलिटिकल, स्पिरिचुअल, सोशल किस तरह से होता है। लेकिन अब मेरे सामने एक मसला खड़ा हो गया है, वो ये है कि ये सब आपकी बातें हम उन सब हज़ारों हिंदुस्तानियों के पास कैसे लेकर जाएंगे। क्या हमको यूएन विमेन मदद करेगी कि हम एक एक टोली बनाकर जाएं और आपसे भी कहें, और जो हमारी भाई बहन यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं उनसे भी कहें कि ये बातें जाके आगे उस पेट्रियार्कल समुदाय को समझाएं कि देखो ये औरत का दर्जा तुम्हारे दर्जे के बराबर है या और ऊंचा भी है, तुम इसको कब समझोगे। तो इसके लिए मैं आपसे शुक्रगुजार हूँ कि आपने कहा, लेकिन ये भी आपसे विनती करती हूँ कि आगे भी आप ऐसी बातें और फैलाइए ताकि हमारे यहाँ पर इन सब बातों का प्रचार ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा हो।
1 मिनट आकर लूँगा। मैं इस बात को मुस्तकिल कहता हूँ और YouTube वगैरह पे भी मतलब ये चीज़ें मौजूद हैं
जी।
एक बात मैं और कह दूँ कि इस्लाम में लड़की जो है वो नेमत है, बीवी जो है वो रहमत है, और माँ जो है वो जन्नत है।
वाह वाह, वेरी गुड, वेरी गुड, वेरी गुड। हमारे बीच में इसमें मेहदी जी हैं, मैं उनसे, इस्मत जी,
ये बैठे।
मैं उनसे Can I request you to please give your address? Thank you.
Okay. Mohni ji, Farida, Akhtar al-Wasi, and Sayyida and Hamid, who called me very graciously, and all participants who've come here and who are all empowered into empowerment of women. So before I begin, I would like to give a little background of Hyderabad, because I come from Hyderabad. And unlike other parts of India, it had its own identity. It was not like the other parts of British India. So it was ruled over by the Nizams, who were enlightened rulers, and they got the best minds from the rest of India to come and govern and administer the state. One of them was Sarojini Naidu's father, and then Sarojini Naidu grew up in Hyderabad. So she had a very big influence on the ladies around her, and many of whom we see, whose pictures we see, who are from Hyderabad, were her friends. So we should give the first credit, I think, to Sarojini Naidu, who inspired them all. So while the position of women, as Akhtarji just said, was far superior in Islam, and it was superior in comparison with other religions at that time, and Muslim women enjoyed greater rights than the others, we cannot ignore the fact that over the years, over the centuries, their position has deteriorated. And it is being quoted that the Quranic verse says that men are Ar-rijalu qawwamuna ala nisa. Men are superior to women. So that verse has been taken and interpreted in many ways to keep women down. So we have to now see how to undo what has been done over the centuries. So when Islam spread in the beginning over countries and over continents, it took on features from the conquered lands, where women were not as empowered as in the time of the Prophet, as Akhtar has just explained. Their activities were restricted, and especially in the matter of dress, women were asked to be within the four walls of their dwellings to get their women to follow the dress code of the conquered lands, and that was the burqa, the hijab, and the niqab. And that began to be worn by women, especially after the 3rd century after Hijrah. So coming back to Hyderabad, I would say that the first woman who made a mark as early as the 18th century was a woman called Mahlaka Bai Chanda. So she wrote her diwan in Urdu, and it is the first diwan written in Urdu by a woman which is been published. So it is in the position of the Oriental and India House collection of the British Library, because Mahlaka Bai Chanda gave this collection of verse to the resident, and he presented it to the India House. And each verse ends with a quotation, with a line to Hazrat Ali, whom she admired a lot and whom she wrote about. So the Nizams of Hyderabad, who got these people, they were very enlightened rulers. The school where I studied is Mehboobiya Girls' School, which some of you know about, had started by the 5th Nizam in 1907, and it had the first lady there, Tayyaba Khadif Jung, was one of its founders and also one of the teachers over there. So she studied over there also. So her daughter was Masuma Begum. Masuma Begum was Tayyaba Begum's daughter, but Tayyaba Begum herself strongly promoted the Prophet's ideals of education. And she started an Anjuman called Anjuman-e-Khawatine-Islam to empower women with knowledge and with skills. So many women followed her, and the second one was Sughra Humayun Mirza. So I would like to talk a little about Sughra Humayun Mirza. So, but that will be later on. Among the active women of Hyderabad, mention must be made of Fakhrul Hajia Begum, who is considered unique in many ways. She took part in many of the All India Women's Conferences. And when she was accused by one of the members, why did the Prophet marry several women, and how are you advocating the ways of the Prophet? So she got up and said, when the Prophet was at 25 years old, he married a woman who was 40 years old, and he remained faithful to her for a number of years. So what is the harm if after all these years, when a man is 60 years old, he marries young women? Moreover, most of them were widows and political marriages. So what was the harm in them? So things like that she would say very forcefully. Then she had a great way of bringing up her children, and this is very important. She encouraged her children to join the national movement, and her sons went and joined Gandhiji's ashram, when very few families in Hyderabad would do that, because they were all very loyal to the Nizam and not to the others. So here there were people who had joined Gandhiji's ashram, and the first bonfire was made in her house. So the resident of Hyderabad who saw this bonfire from where he was, he called my grandfather, this is my grandfather now, and he said, this should not happen. Foreign cloth is being burnt, and what are you doing about it? So he came to his wife and he said, stop your children from burning this cloth. So she said, this is my house and these are my children. If you want, you can go. They can do what they want in the interest of the nation. And she was very anti-British, so she sent her children to Germany to study. The next woman is Begum Sughra Humayun Mirza. Sughra Humayun Mirza was the first woman to shake off her parda. So in the middle of a mixed gathering, she just dropped her burqa and she said, from now on, I would like to challenge anyone who says that this is written in the Quran. It is not in the Quran. What is there in the Quran is that you should be modestly dressed. Men should lower their gaze. And why should men lower their gaze? Because at that time, women were wearing everything. So it is not that the restriction was very strict. Then she started thinking about the position of women, and she said that they have to be educated. She started a number of schools. It's called the Savdariya Girls' School, and it is still running. The 2,000 girls are educated from lower middle class families, and she involved herself in matters concerning women. She would invite people like Mahatma Gandhi, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Sarojini Naidu, and everyone to her school, and this school is very talked about. Then many women who served Hyderabad in the latter half of the 20th century was Masuma Begum, daughter of Tayyaba Khadib Chand. So she saw change coming over Hyderabad, and she contributed to the change. And whenever there were some problems with conservative ladies, she would call men, she would draw a curtain, and the men would ask questions and answer. So she said, I'm putting men behind the veil now. encouraging women to talk out. Next, we have Zehra Ali Awarjang, whose photo you have seen over there. She was married to Ali Awarjang, and she started the National Society for Clean Cities, National Society in Bombay, and that is, she was the president of the organization, and she was given Padma Bhushan for it. So women of Hyderabad have been making many contributions, and one was Zeenat Sajida. Zeenat Sajida was a writer, and she was the first woman PhD in Urdu in Hyderabad University. So I would like to read out from her story a little, and she said, it is called If Allah Were a Woman. Agar Allah Miyan Aurat Hoti. And I've translated it. She said, deep pain, the woman says, deep pain unnerves me. Hands and feet benumb me. I have no strength left to meet or to be social. It is a sin to be a woman, to make her bear sins of the big world, to inherit all weaknesses. Only a woman can feel the pain of a woman. O Allah, would that you were a woman and did not have to face such agony. Then she ends her story. She says, Allah, you are forgiving. Mother says that all I have been thinking about you is impertinent and impolite. But you are forgiving. Forgive me my impertinence. After all, my gender is also your creation. You alone have granted me heart and mind. But hear me out. Whosoever you may be nothing or be everything, you are dear to me, dearer than all my countless desires. You know the unknown, so you know how my impertinence has come about. With you alone I speak. So forgive me, dear Allah. I just on a whim thought if Allah were a woman. She writes very strongly in support of women. Then I have got a number of other women who have contributed, like Jamalunnisa Begum, who joined the Communist Party, and she used to represent women in Moscow, in Hungary, and her memoirs are Bikhri Yaadein, and they're very powerful and urge women to come up. Then Bilqis Latif, I have to mention, because she was the wife of the former Air Chief of India, Idris Latif. She believed that service to mankind was service to God. And the affluence of her family did not close her eyes to the poverty of others. So wherever she was, in whichever station her husband was posted, she would do for the poor. And she was a founder of Society for Human and Environmental Development. And single-handedly, and this is a major contribution, single-handedly she lifted the status of Dharavi, the largest slum in Asia. And it was at one time crammed, as we know, with unhygienic wastes. And now it is a colony of houses where people are employed, and she has done a lot of work. So I think I will sum up now. Then there is the women who have been lawyers, women who have been doctors, and so many. But I have to end with Sania Mirza. Because she was accused by the Maulvis, by the Maulanas, of not adhering to Islamic rites and of wearing shorts and going to Wimbledon and playing. But she stood her ground. She's a very forceful woman. She stood her ground. She would wear what was demanded, and she's acknowledged as the top tennis woman star of India. And recently she performed Umrah with her husband. So these women whom I have mentioned have been both very Islamic practitioner, and then also they have done a lot of important work to empower other women.
pleasure listening to you and knowing something about Hyderabad and the women of Hyderabad who have been famous. I still remember working with Mrs. Aliya Vajjang and how she progressed into things, and many other women like that. Thank you for enlightening us on that. Having said that, I once again request you all that let us look at this past and see how we can make the future strong. This is again and again I'm requesting. Thank you. We have with us Farida Khanji, and we are very happy to have her here with us. I'm sure she will also throw some light on future of what we should do.
Thank you. Okay, I think mine is going to be a slightly different voice here. You know, when I first got this invitation, and I have to thank Saida Appa for inviting me and giving me the chance, but I really felt that, and I looked at women pathbreakers, Muslim women in the early this century, okay, last century, sorry, and their role in, I mean, if you see a lot of them, they were very involved in the national life, etc. It makes me sad to think that you need to have an exhibition and you need to put up these women in a country where they should be well known, where they should be part of the mainstream, where everybody should know their names and know what they've done. We have come to a pass where actually you have to put up an exhibition, you have to put up a separate, you know, you have to set up a kind of, you know, platform for introducing them here. And I have to say, given that when I was going through these, some of these biographies and autobiographies, I was surprised myself, and I thought, you know, this is, since I come from education, this is the way we have, you know, we've been through an educational system, we've read, and, you know, especially around the nationalist struggle, etc. I didn't know to date that actually Soraya Tayyibji had designed the flag of India. I mean, that should be something everyone in this country should know. I'm not saying that that's the most important thing that happened, but given that national struggle and issues around it are so important when we talk of, you know, the nation, the independence, the struggle for independence, creating the symbols of independence. But, and, you know, I know I am ignorant on this count, but so are so many other people. I talk to a lot of people, and most of my friends didn't know that for a fact. But, you know, having said that, I also want to, the other slight discomfort I have is with this label of feminism and Islam. Also because why should Islam have the burden of taking on feminism? It is a religion, it, you know, came in a certain socio-historical context, and it is a part of, there is a long history to being Muslim or being, you know, the religion of Islam, and people within that religion don't agree across regions or have exactly the same ways of being or practicing or not practicing, and existing and changing the world in different ways. It doesn't always have to fall on the religion to actually, you know, create certain different struggles. For example, we all, you know, a lot of us believe in democratic ways of living. This is not a polity that existed when Islam first came, or a lot of the major religions of the world do not have democratic orders within which they exist. One can create them and look for hints towards democracy. But the one thing that all religions have, and I don't think that would be only specific to Islam, is a sense of humanity, of not hurting other human beings, of having a world where people, you know, can live amicably and not be hating each other. And today we live in a society where exactly that is happening. And Muslims as a, you know, I think it's also a very particular situation for Muslims in this country today, which is not exactly what we can think of everywhere else. There are different kinds of problems that Muslims at the moment are facing. But there is a particular situation within India right now where Muslims are a minority that is under very severe attack. and within that to look for, and there is also, and this is something that is universal, not just Indian, and becoming more and more somewhat, the common wisdom, that Islam particularly has been very oppressive towards women. It is not an Islamic privilege to have been oppressive. Every religion actually has some differences. Women, we see women around us. After all, we are talking of Muslim women today. This country has several religions. Muslim women face the same problems, and sometimes, other women might be facing worse problems. But it's not only to do with religion. What we have to remember is that all of these, you can't essentialize a religion and take that as a given for everything that happens today. You can't. There is a whole history and social conditions, and that historicization is very important to remember when you think of where you are and why you are at this position. There are economic and political systems which actually determine a lot of what happens in specific places to specific identities. This identity politics and, of trying to find certain identities which become so important that that's the only thing that defines you is what is really disturbing. And for Muslims today, especially in India, that seems to be the identity by which you are defined and you begin to define yourself. What happens also when, the situations become so, there's a sense of insecurity where politically you feel insecure, not protected. You tend to take on these identities much more forcefully. You tend to look for security elsewhere. And if that security is only coming from, maybe regressive forces within religious formations, you are much more vulnerable to become a part of that than to actually look for something else that may be different. That Muslim, what this exhibition and this whole, the project actually is doing is actually showing you that Muslim women, even in one particular geographical area, were doing very different things in as early as the early 1900s is where we have this set of women from. Just as you would have examples of women through the centuries who you could categorize, whether they're living in Muslim countries or very Muslim, or who were religious women or in secular positions, who have fought for these. This is a human struggle to look for better worlds. We all do it, and hopefully, it's some kind of, I think, a human need to live in worlds which you think of as better than the ones you are in, or work towards better societies. This country actually started with the constitution. The present nation that we have inherited has a constitution which would be the envy of any man or woman. But what it has come to today is a very different sight. And I think within where we are today, I think it is important to remember that Muslim women from within this particular community in different parts of India have contributed as much as any other women have. And that there is nothing particularly regressive about Islam that pertains to women that doesn't exist for women everywhere. And in any community and any society, you all would have been following in the West the feminist struggle, which is a very modern idea. So that's why it's said that I don't know why Islam should have the burden of having created feminism, because it gave rights to women which were not known at that time. In fact, the bill for what was, some of you would know better, 1937, the Muslim Women's Bill, it was called. The Shariat Bill, yeah. The Shariat Bill was something that was supported by Muslim women because under colonial rule, we were following what are called what is called customary law. And the customs were so awful that Muslim women felt that if the Shariat bill is passed, they will have much better lives. They were not being given property. They were, deprived of several things that the Shariat gives them. So that shows you even in 1937 in India, non-Muslim laws, which would not be particularly Islamic at all, were such that they were much worse than what we talk about when we talk about the Sharia laws, which are not particularly, generous to women. You have property laws, but that property is 1/4 of what the male heir gets. You have other laws, but you have some very progressive laws if you think of within, what are the oppressions that women face. One of those is the right to divorce, which Muslim women have. Now, which may not be admitted into, a lot of nikah namas don't actually include it, and therefore you may not have it. But it is a law that actually Muslim women can claim for themselves. But the patriarchal forces and power is such that most Muslim women don't even dare ask for it. So and this is not just for Muslim women. We know that all women in this country go through, they have to face oppressions and within these power relations and within very patriarchal structures, they face the same problems. But this Muslim woman has become a particularly singularly, kind of visible object of pity of a lot of other women who are actually much worse off. And that's what really surprises me often. And you have actually a Mr. Modi who presided over the killing and rape of thousands of Muslim women in Gujarat not so long ago, actually talking about the poor Muslim women. And I think that's what should really shock us and make us think about why this Muslim woman is being singled and what is going to happen to this Muslim woman eventually if she is being singled like this under the present regime. But this is the regime and this is the government that is talking of actually looking after Muslim women, and it picks the issue of triple talaq. That is the most important issue, that women have. That Muslim women actually were denied the right to get an alimony of 200 rupees or what was it, 500 rupees. That is not important enough. But that she can get a triple talaq. So, okay, you let her get it over 3 months. That's a much, that's a bigger whatever, that's a great improvement, and then after that she can be on the roads, it doesn't matter. And I don't see many Muslim men fighting for that either. I haven't seen any Muslim men's delegations going out and, on the roads and fighting for Muslim women's property rights and divorce rights and alimony rights and meher rights. So let's not think of it as just the problem, that it's not a problem that the religion is going to resolve by itself. What we have to remember is that it is one religion amongst many, and the women are women like anywhere else, that they may have particular cultural and, regional and linguistic affiliations would be as diverse as anywhere else. But what actually is specific and what we need to remember and what should trouble us, that today the Muslim woman has become this one category who is actually should be worried in this country today. And I think that one has to take a little more seriously, that the Muslim woman is one kind of woman is very obvious, and I think, anyone who can think a little or who understands any sociology or, anthropology or whatever, politics, would understand that there is no way. We are all shaped by our cultures, by our locations, by the political systems, and there are as many varieties. A few years ago, Zoya Hassan and Ritu Menon did this very large study across India, and there are enough research studies to show you that Muslim women across the country or Muslim societies in this country are not exactly the same. There is as much variety as there is amongst other communities. That there will be some particularly cultural factors which may be common to them is obviously a given, but there will be others that will not. And there will be the Muslim identity which is important at particular times. At other times it is not, and usually it hasn't been the most important identity for women. The religious identity is not always the most important identity that women actually work within, but the times actually are forcing Muslim women to think of the religious identity as an important one. And that is something that should give us cause for concern, and that is something what we have to fight against. But also, again, we have to fight against it not as Muslim women. There are enough of us, these women who are, even shown upstairs, worked with many others. They worked with Hindu women, with Christian women. There were women of all kinds who worked together and who probably didn't at that time think of, foregrounding their religious identities. A lot of them actually gave up their religious identities. A lot of people in UP, for example, some of the women were very strongly Marxist and, leftist, who actually didn't want to be considered through their religious identities at all. But they were women from Muslim homes and, who would be considered Muslim women in the broader cultural sense. So today we are forced to think of Muslim women within some kind of essentialist religion that was, that came into being however many hundreds of years ago, and it will work only in those same ways. That's not possible. I mean, the world changes, there are different systems. I would not like to be held to that identity which was created at the time that Islam came into being. I think there have been struggles that have been waged by people from within the religions and outside, and those struggles which make the world a better place are worth taking forward. But if we are going to divide it into these categories and name those categories through only religious senses, I mean, it's also done for a purpose. We have to look at the political, economic factors which come into play. We have to look at the larger international factors where a lot of the countries in the Islamic world or countries around the Middle East which have been the kind of, crucible of Islam are under attack for various reasons, and these identities are being strengthened. So I would just like to end with that, and I really think, for one, because I'm in education, because you asked that how can we take this forward, I really think that some of these biographies and these portraits we have upstairs should be in our textbooks. We don't have any of these. When I taught, I've just retired from the university, and because I was in education, one of the texts that some of us would often introduce was Ruqayya Shekhawat Hussain, the Rukhsana, what is it? Rukhsana's dream. Sultana's, yeah, right, I was getting confused. Sultana's dream, and, students loved it. But it's one way, and very often actually students would get surprised that it's a Muslim woman who wrote it. And that itself is shocking, that they should feel, how could a Muslim woman write this? But, texts like that, I mean, today, since there is also talk of rewriting histories, rewriting textbooks, what is happening? I think some of the things we could fight for is taking this into the textbooks and, making it. I mean, today, I think most people don't even hear these names who were so. What did you say?
Good luck with that. I mean, the idea that you're going to get iconic women into textbooks
Yeah.
is counter. Forget Muslim women.
Right.
Progressive women are counter to this government's idea of women.
Of course.
Farah,
But I think
we'll
that
have
is, those are the things we can. So
We
I'll
have a
stop
question
there.
answer session. At that time we can.
Farida, conclude kar do.
Yeah, that's it. I just wanted to bring some of these to the fore so that we don't get lost also in this Muslim women identity, and that in Islam there is a particular slant against women that, I mean, Muslim women are always talked about as Muslim women. Other women are never talked about. You don't hear about Christian women, Hindu women as much as you hear about Muslim women. Thank you.
Mohini ji wants to answer on something that Farida said, but I think we'll just format this in the sense that I just want to say that this is remarkable in the diversity. We talk of Muslim women not being a homogeneous or some kind of a monolith, and here you have a wonderful diversity. Professor Akhtarul Wase quoted from the Prophet's life and gave us living examples. Ismat Mehdi brought case studies from Hyderabad and enlightened me on who was this Tayyaba Khatib Jung, the woman that I've been living with for the last 2 or 3 months. Day and night I'm thinking of her. and she placed it in context along with Hyderabadi women. And my boss here, Dr. Mohini Giri, I'll come to her at the end because then I'll pass it on to her. And Farida, who again made a very important point, which was, the fact that you cannot essentialize Muslim women. I'm wearing this. Leila told me this is a Odisha sari, or somebody told me. Who told me it was an Odisha sari? Leila told me. That's what I wear. To me, this is my cultural identity. I don't wear a hijab. My mother did not wear a hijab. I'm a praying, fasting Muslim woman. And yet I'm never taken seriously because I am not dressed in the Arabic mode, which has been imported. So I think these are very important issues that have been brought out and beautifully by each one of the speakers. And as far as my interest in activism in Muslim women is concerned, the one responsible for it is sitting right here. It was Mohini Giri as the chair of the Women's Commission who actually